The evening sky was turning gray, and soft rain had started to fall. The streets were quiet except for the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement. A tired-looking man walked home from work holding a small paper bag of groceries. His shoes were soaked and his coat was old, but he didn't mind. He was used to it. Life had been hard since his wife passed away, but his little boy at home gave him the strength to keep going. As he walked past the park, he noticed something unusual. On a wooden bench under the dim streetlight, a young woman sat hunched over, holding something wrapped in a thin blanket. At first he thought maybe she was just resting, but when lightning flashed, he saw tears on her face. The bundle in her arms moved slightly. It was a baby. He stopped. His first thought was that she might be in trouble. His second thought was concern for the child. The woman looked cold, wet, and lost. For a moment he hesitated. It wasn't really his business. But as he took a few more steps, his conscience wouldn't let him walk away. He turned back, walked slowly toward her, and spoke softly. "Miss, are you all right?" She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the baby. Her lips trembled as she whispered something too low to hear. He stepped closer, careful not to frighten her. "It's raining harder. Maybe you should come under the shelter." Finally, she looked up at him. Her face was pale and her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that comes from too many nights without sleep. "I'm fine," she said quietly, "just resting." He looked at the baby again, wrapped in a thin cloth, face half covered. "The baby must be cold," he said. "There's a small cafe nearby. I can get you both something warm." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't have money." "It's all right," he said kindly. "I'm not asking for that." The woman looked down again, then slowly nodded. He could tell she didn't trust people easily. Together they walked toward the cafe, the rain falling harder now. When they entered, the warmth and smell of coffee filled the air. He guided her to a quiet corner and ordered 2 cups of tea and a bowl of soup. The baby whimpered softly, and the woman rocked her gently, whispering, "It's okay, my love. It's okay." The sound broke his heart a little. He could tell she loved the child deeply. When the food came, she tried to refuse at first, but hunger won. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone who hadn't had a full meal in days. The man didn't ask questions. He just sat quietly, watching rain slide down the window. After a while, he asked softly, "Do you have somewhere to go?" She froze, then shook her head. "No. I was staying with someone, but they told me to leave. I've been walking since morning." He nodded slowly. "Do you have family around here?" She hesitated. "No one," she said, her voice breaking. No one left. There was silence between them. He looked at her and then at the baby. The tiny child was asleep, her little hands peeking out from the blanket. Something inside him stirred. Maybe it was because he once had a wife who used to cradle their own baby like that. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be alone and scared. "It's not safe to stay outside tonight," he said finally. "If you want, you can come to my place. I live nearby. It's small but warm. You and the baby can rest there for the night." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "I can't. I don't even know you." "That's fair," he replied. "You don't have to trust me. I'm just offering help. You can leave any time you want." She looked down, then at her sleeping child. After a long silence, she nodded. "Just for tonight." He smiled faintly. "All right, just tonight." They walked through the wet streets again, rain glistening under the street lights. When they reached his small apartment, he quickly turned on the heater and gave her a towel. She dried the baby first, gently wiping the tiny face and wrapping her in a dry sheet he gave her. He went into the kitchen, warmed some milk, and came back with a bowl of soup for her again. "You can feed her," he said. "She must be hungry too." The woman smiled faintly for the first time that night. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't even know us." He shrugged gently. "Sometimes strangers understand better than friends." For a while the room was quiet except for the soft sound of the baby's breathing. The man went to check on his little boy in the other room, fast asleep, his small hand clutching a toy car. When he came back, the woman was humming to her baby in a low voice, her eyes glistening with tears she tried to hide. "You can rest on the couch," he said. "I'll take the chair." "I can't take your space," she said quickly. He smiled a little. "It's fine. I'm used to uncomfortable chairs." That made her laugh softly, though her eyes were still sad. "You're kind," she said. He didn't reply. He just turned off the main light, leaving only the small lamp glowing near the baby's blanket. Later that night, he woke up to the sound of soft crying. The woman was sitting on the couch holding her baby close. "Shh, please stop crying," she whispered over and over, though she herself was crying harder. He stood quietly in the doorway, unsure what to say. She didn't see him watching. She pressed her forehead against the baby's tiny head and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He turned away. He knew pain when he saw it. Whatever she had gone through, it was more than anyone should bear. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. The smell of coffee filled the room. He was in the kitchen, making breakfast, when he heard movement. The woman came out quietly, baby still asleep in her arms. She looked a bit better, though her face was pale. "Good morning," he said gently. "I made some toast and eggs." She gave a small nod. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said with a small smile. "But I wanted to." As they ate, she was quiet, lost in thought. After a few minutes, she spoke in a trembling voice. "You have a child too?" He nodded. "A boy. 6 years old. He's still asleep." "He's lucky," she said softly, "to have you." He looked at her curiously. "And your baby is lucky to have you." Her lips tightened. She looked down, tears forming in her eyes again. "I don't think so," he frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, clutching her baby closer. "I love her, more than anything. But I have nothing. No job, no home, no one who can help. I can't even buy milk for her." He opened his mouth to speak, but she continued. "Last week I slept outside a store. The rain came down all night. I thought she wouldn't make it. I kept holding her, trying to keep her warm. I don't know what else to do anymore." Her voice broke completely. "She deserves a chance to live. I don't think I can give her that." He felt his heart twist. "Don't say that," he said softly. "Things can change." She shook her head. "Not for me." She looked straight into his eyes then, her face filled with pain and something like surrender. "You're a good man. You take care of your child, please. Take care of mine too." He froze, stunned. "What are you saying?" She placed the sleeping baby gently on the couch. "I can't take care of her," she whispered. "Please. She'll have a better life with you." He shook his head quickly. "No, you can't just give away your child. You're just tired, that's all. We can find help. There are shelters, programs." She stood up, her voice trembling. "I've tried. You don't understand. I've begged, I've gone to places. They all said no. I can't let her starve. You have a home. You have kindness, please." Before he could stop her, tears streamed down her face. "If I stay, she'll suffer. If I go, she might live." He stepped closer, gently holding her arm. "Don't do this. We'll figure something out together." But she pulled away, shaking her head. "No one can help me anymore." Then, with a final look at her baby, she whispered, "Tell her I loved her." She turned and ran toward the door. He called after her, but she was already gone. He rushed outside, but the street was empty, rain starting to fall again as if the sky itself shared her pain. He stood there for a long time, the sound of thunder echoing far away. When he went back inside, the baby stirred on the couch, tiny fingers reaching up as if asking for comfort. He sat down beside her, picked her up gently, and held her close. She opened her eyes for the first time and looked at him with quiet innocence, unaware of the storm that had just passed. He whispered softly, "Don't worry, you're safe now." And for the first time in a long while, he felt tears slip down his cheeks, not of sadness, but of something deeper, a sense that fate had brought this fragile life into his hands for a reason he couldn't yet understand. The baby yawned, then closed her eyes again. He rocked her slowly, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. The apartment was silent except for the soft rhythm of the rain. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had happened. But inside that small room, a new story had just begun, one built from kindness, heartbreak, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, everything happens for a reason. The next morning, the man woke up to the soft sound of crying. For a moment, he thought it was a dream. But then he remembered. The baby. She was lying in the small basket he had quickly made the night before from a laundry box and a soft towel. Her little hands moved restlessly and her eyes were wet with tiny tears. He quickly went to her and picked her up. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered gently. The baby calmed down a little, her small face pressing against his shirt. He could feel how warm and fragile she was, how small her fingers felt when they clutched his thumb. Something stirred deep inside him. It was strange, but it didn't feel like she was a stranger. He made a small bottle of milk from what he had for his own son. When he fed her, she looked up at him with those wide, innocent eyes. He felt something in his chest tighten. He had seen those eyes before, on the park bench when her mother begged the night sky for help. His son, still half asleep, walked out of his room rubbing his eyes. "Dad," he mumbled, "whose baby is that?" He looked at his boy and sighed softly. "She's a little girl who needs a home for a while," he said. "Her mom had to go somewhere." The boy frowned. "So she's staying here?" "For now," his father said quietly. The boy smiled sleepily. "Okay, can I help?" That small moment filled the man's heart with warmth. He nodded. "Yes, you can help." The day passed slowly. He went to the nearby police station and told the officer everything that had happened. They noted it down and said they would make an announcement and try to find the baby's mother. He left the station with a heavy heart. He wanted to believe she'd come back, but a part of him knew she wouldn't. Not soon, at least. When he returned home, the baby was asleep in the old crib he'd taken out of storage. His son sat beside her, watching over her carefully. "Dad," the boy whispered, "she looks happy." He smiled a little. "She does." Days turned into a week. The baby filled their small home with new sounds. Soft coos, gentle cries, tiny laughs when the boy made funny faces. The man found himself smiling more than before. Even though he was exhausted from late-night feedings, something about the baby gave his life a quiet peace he hadn't felt in years. But at night, when everything went still, he often found himself staring at the baby and wondering where her mother was. Was she safe? Did she eat? Did she regret leaving her child behind? He told himself that maybe she just needed time to get back on her feet, that she'd return when she could. But deep down, he feared the truth was much harder. One evening, as he was putting the baby to sleep, there was a knock on the door. It was one of his neighbors, an elderly woman who lived next door. She smiled warmly and said, "I heard a baby crying a lot these days. Did someone have a new one?" He explained everything, how he found the woman in the rain, how she had left her child, and how he was now taking care of her until the authorities found the mother. The old woman's eyes softened. "You've got a kind heart," she said. "Most people would have called someone right away and turned her in without a thought. But you opened your door instead." He smiled faintly. "I just couldn't leave her out there. The baby's innocent." The woman nodded. "You did the right thing. But remember, good hearts often carry heavy burdens too." He knew she was right. Over the next few weeks, the police still hadn't found any trace of the baby's mother. No one had reported a missing woman or child. The man slowly realized that the baby might stay with him much longer than he'd thought. He named her Hope. It wasn't official, but that's what he called her. It felt right, because that's what she brought into his life, a small spark of hope. His days became a new routine. He'd wake up early, make breakfast, take his son to school, and then rush home to care for Hope. His work as a mechanic allowed him some flexibility, so he'd sometimes bring her to the garage, placing her safely in a baby seat while he worked. Everyone who saw her smiled. She had a way of melting hearts instantly. One afternoon, while he was fixing a car, his friend at the shop asked, "Whose baby is that?" He told him the story, and his friend shook his head in disbelief. "You're really looking after her? That's a lot, man. You already have your own kid." "I know," he said quietly, "but I can't turn her away." His friend looked at him seriously. "You've got a big heart, but you're also human. Don't let this wear you down." He smiled faintly. "Some things are worth getting tired for." Later that evening, as the sun began to set, he walked home carrying Hope in one arm and groceries in the other. When he reached his apartment, his son ran to him, grinning. "Dad, she laughed today." "Like a real laugh." He laughed too, placing the bag on the table. "Did she now?" The boy nodded eagerly. "I made funny faces and she giggled." Hope sat in his arms now, looking at both of them with those bright, trusting eyes. The man couldn't help smiling. She was beginning to feel like family. Still, part of him couldn't forget the night the woman left. Sometimes when he looked out the window and saw rain falling, he remembered her face, the tears, the desperation, the way she said, "Please take care of her." He wished he could tell her that her baby was safe and loved. One night, as he sat by the crib, he whispered softly, "If only you could see her now. She's growing, she's smiling. You'd be proud." The baby stirred a little in her sleep, and he smiled sadly. Weeks turned into months. The police eventually said there was nothing more they could do. If no one comes forward, you might want to think about temporary guardianship, they told him. He nodded quietly. The idea felt strange, but he knew it made sense. Hope needed stability. He went home and sat down with his son. Listen, he began softly. You know how Hope has been staying with us for a while? The boy nodded. Yeah, well, she might stay longer. Maybe even for good. The boy's face lit up. Really, that means she's my sister now. He chuckled. Something like that, yes, the boy grinned. Good, I like her. She makes our house happy again. Those words stayed in his heart long after his son went to bed. He looked around their small apartment. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of love. He realized that somehow their broken little family had become whole again in an unexpected way. Still, every night before he slept, he whispered a small prayer for the young woman who had disappeared into the rain. He didn't know her name, where she came from, or if she was even alive. But he hoped that wherever she was, she'd found some peace knowing her child was safe. One quiet morning, about 3 months after she left, something unusual happened. As he was sweeping the front steps, he noticed a small folded note slipped under the door. His heart raced as he picked it up. The handwriting was shaky, the paper slightly wet as if it had been held by trembling hands. He unfolded it carefully. There were only a few words written. Thank you for keeping her safe. I can't come back yet, but I watch from afar. Please tell her one day that her mother loved her more than anything. He stared at the note for a long time. His hands trembled. She was alive. She had been nearby all this time. He rushed outside, looking up and down the street, but there was no one there, only the morning breeze moving gently through the trees. He stood there for a while, the note clutched in his hand, tears welling in his eyes. When he went back inside, Hope was awake in her crib, smiling and kicking her little legs. He lifted her into his arms, holding her close. Your mama loves you, he whispered softly. She really does. He decided not to tell the police about the note. Something told him it was best to let things be. Maybe she'd come back one day when she was ready. In the meantime, he would do what he promised, keep the baby safe, give her warmth, and raise her with love until her mother could return. That night, after putting both children to bed, he sat by the window, looking out into the quiet street. Somewhere out there, a young woman was probably watching from a distance, too afraid to come closer. He wished he could tell her she didn't have to be afraid, that she didn't have to run anymore, but all he could do was hope. The rain started to fall again, soft and steady. He listened to it in silence. The sound no longer felt lonely. It felt like a promise. In that small apartment, surrounded by the sound of rain and the soft breathing of 2 sleeping children, the man closed his eyes. He didn't know what the future held. But for now there was peace, a fragile, beautiful peace born from kindness, pain, and love. And somewhere out there, under the same sky, a mother whispered her prayers for the baby she had left behind, hoping that one day she would be strong enough to come back home. The morning sun poured softly through the thin curtains as the man stood by the window, holding the note in his hand again. It had been a few days since he found it. He had read those few lines so many times that he almost knew them by heart. Thank you for keeping her safe. I can't come back yet, but I watch from afar. Every time he read it, a strange mix of emotions filled his chest. Relief, sadness, and quiet hope. She was alive. That alone brought comfort. But knowing she was nearby and still choosing to stay hidden broke his heart a little more each day. He didn't tell anyone about the note. Not the police, not his friends, not even his son. It felt like something personal, something sacred between him, the baby, and the woman who had trusted him in her darkest hour. The baby, now about 7 months old, had grown brighter and stronger. She was full of life, always smiling, always curious. His son adored her. Every morning before school, he would make silly faces to make her laugh. Their small home had filled with laughter again, the kind that makes even tired days feel lighter. But despite the joy, the man often found his thoughts wandering to the woman who had left her child. He imagined her walking the same streets, maybe watching from afar as he carried the baby to the park or the grocery store. Sometimes he even thought he saw her, a shadow standing near the corner, a figure crossing the street quickly when he turned around. But whenever he looked closely, she was gone. One afternoon, while walking back from the store, he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. On the wall near the park, someone had left a small bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind he used to see near the bench where he had first met her. A folded piece of paper was tucked beneath them. His heart pounded as he looked around, but no one was there. He slowly picked up the paper. It had just one line written on it. "She looks healthy. Thank you." His eyes filled with tears. She really had been watching. She must have seen them during their walks in the park. He looked around again, hoping to catch even a glimpse of her, but only the wind moved through the trees. He whispered softly, "Where are you?" But only the sound of leaves answered him. Back home, he placed the flowers in a small glass jar on the table. His son noticed and asked, "Who gave you those?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who cares about hope." The boy grinned. "They're pretty. Can we keep them?" He nodded. "Yes, we'll keep them." That night, after putting the children to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the flowers. He felt torn. Part of him wanted to find her and tell her to come home, that she didn't need to hide anymore. The other part feared that maybe she wasn't ready, that maybe she'd disappear completely if he tried to chase her. The next morning, he made a decision. He would look for her, not to pressure her, but to help her. Over the next few weeks, he began asking around quietly. He showed her description to a few shop owners near the park, to people at the shelter, to the lady who ran the small cafe where they had eaten that rainy night. Most people said they hadn't seen anyone like her. Some said maybe she had moved away. But one man, the cafe owner, paused when he saw the description. "Wait," the man said slowly. "A young woman used to come here early in the mornings. Always sat in the corner, barely spoke. Looked weak, like she hadn't eaten in days. She had this look in her eyes, like she was searching for something but too scared to ask." The man's heart pounded. "When did she stop coming?" The owner shrugged. "A few weeks ago. Haven't seen her since." He thanked him and left, walking back home with heavy steps. Maybe she was nearby. Maybe she was struggling again. When he got home, Hope was crawling on the floor, her son cheering her on. The sight made him smile. He lifted her up and she laughed, her tiny hands touching his face. In that moment, he made another silent promise. No matter what happened, he would never let her feel abandoned again. Days passed. Life went on quietly. He worked hard, took care of both children, and did his best to give them a stable life. But sometimes at night he'd step outside and look up at the stars, wondering if she was out there looking at the same sky. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. He had just returned from work when there was a soft knock on the door. It wasn't the loud, hurried kind. It was gentle, hesitant, like someone unsure if they should be there. When he opened the door, no one was standing there. But on the floor was a small envelope. He picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was of Hope, taken from a distance at the park. Her smile was bright, her eyes shining. On the back of the photo, a single line was written, "She looks happy. That's all I ever wanted." He closed his eyes, holding the photo tightly. She had been there again, watching, protecting in her own silent way. He whispered to the empty hallway, "She is happy, but she needs you too." He never got a reply. The following weeks were quiet. No new notes. No flowers, nothing. He began to worry. What if something had happened to her? What if she was sick or worse? He couldn't shake the feeling that she was in trouble. One cold morning, while dropping his son at school, he noticed a familiar figure across the street. Thin, wearing an old coat, head down, walking slowly. He couldn't see her face clearly, but his heart told him it was her. He called out, "Hey, wait!" and started to cross the street. But just then a bus passed between them, blocking his view. When it moved, she was gone. He searched the nearby streets for almost an hour, asking people if they'd seen her, but no one had. That evening, the worry grew heavier. Something wasn't right. He sat by Hope's crib, holding her tiny hand, whispering softly, "I'll find her. I promise." The next day he went to a few nearby hospitals, showing her description and asking if anyone like her had been admitted recently. For hours, every answer was the same. No one like that here. But when he reached the last hospital, an older nurse paused when he showed her the photo from the first night. The nurse frowned slightly. "Wait a moment," she said, and left. A few minutes later, she returned, her expression serious. "I think she's here." She was brought in last night. Weak condition. No ID. She kept whispering about a baby before she fainted. His chest tightened. Where is she now? Room 214, the nurse said gently. He hurried down the hall, his heart pounding faster than it ever had before. When he entered the room, he froze. There she was, pale, thin, hooked up to an IV. Her face looked tired but peaceful in a strange way. He stepped closer, unsure if she could hear him. "It's me," he said softly. "You're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open slowly. When she saw him, tears welled up. "The baby," she whispered weakly. "She's safe," he said quickly, his voice breaking. "She's growing, healthy and happy. She laughs every day. You did the right thing. You saved her." Tears slid down her cheeks. I wanted to come back," she said slowly. "I was working, trying to get enough to take care of her again. But I got sick. I didn't want her to see me like this." He shook his head, tears in his own eyes now. "You don't have to hide anymore. You're not alone. We can help you." She looked at him, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "You're a good man," she whispered. "You gave her what I couldn't, love." He held her hand gently. "She's your daughter. You gave her life. That's love too." She closed her eyes, whispering, "Thank you for keeping her safe." He stayed with her until late that night, watching as she drifted in and out of sleep. Before leaving, he promised, "Tomorrow I'll bring her. You'll see her again." When he returned home, he sat quietly beside Hope's crib. She looked up at him with sleepy eyes and smiled as if she knew something good was about to happen. He gently touched her tiny hand and whispered, "Tomorrow you'll see your mama." For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The search was almost over. He didn't know what would happen next, whether the woman would recover or not, whether she'd be able to take care of the child again. But one thing was certain. They were connected forever by something deeper than blood. The rain began to fall again outside, soft and steady, just like that first night. He looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in the puddles below. Life had taken all of them through pain, fear, and uncertainty. But somehow love had found its way through it all. He whispered into the quiet room, "We're almost there." And as the baby drifted back to sleep, her tiny fingers wrapped around his, holding on tightly, just as if she never wanted to let go. Days had turned into months, and the little girl had become part of the man's home in a way he never expected. The sound of her tiny laugh had filled corners of the house that once felt empty. His son adored her too. Every evening when he came back from work, the two children would rush to the door, one with small steps and another with open arms. It made every long day worth it. He had almost stopped wondering where the young woman had gone. Almost. But sometimes when the house went quiet, he would remember her face, the way she had looked that night, scared yet gentle, with tears hidden behind her trembling smile. He often told himself she might have gone far away to start a new life. He hoped so. He had even imagined her walking into a bakery or small shop, working hard, trying to stand again. It was easier to think that way than to believe she might be suffering somewhere. But one cold evening, everything changed. It was a normal day. The children were playing near the kitchen while he was preparing dinner. The phone suddenly rang and he picked it up, wiping his hands with a towel. "Hello, sir? Are you the man who reported a missing woman a few months ago? The one who left a child with you?" The voice on the other end was from a hospital. His heart dropped instantly. "Yes, I'm the one." Is she okay?" There was a pause. "She's in critical condition. She mentioned your name before losing consciousness. Can you come immediately?" He didn't even think twice. He grabbed his jacket, called his neighbor to stay with the children, and rushed out into the cold night. His heart was pounding with fear, confusion, and guilt. He hadn't seen her in months. Why now? What had happened to her all this time? The hospital was quiet when he arrived. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, and the sound of slow footsteps echoed down the corridor. A nurse led him to a room at the end of the hallway. When he stepped in, his breath caught in his throat. It was her. She looked thinner, paler, weaker than he remembered. Tubes and wires surrounded her, and her hands trembled slightly as she breathed. But even in that fragile state, she looked peaceful, almost relieved to see him. He moved closer, pulling a chair beside her bed. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He just looked at her, remembering that night. The rain, the fear, the desperation in her voice when she said, Please, I can't take care of her. She slowly turned her head and opened her eyes. You came, she whispered. He nodded quickly. Of course I came. How are you feeling? A weak smile touched her lips. I'm tired. So tired. He wanted to say something comforting, but his throat felt tight. You don't have to talk, just rest. I'm here. But she shook her head slightly. No, I need to tell you. He leaned closer as she tried to speak. Her voice was faint, but every word carried weight. I didn't abandon her, she said slowly. I couldn't. I just wanted her to live. He stayed silent, listening carefully as tears welled up in her eyes. When I left, I thought I would come back soon. I found a small job cleaning a shop during nights. It wasn't much, but I thought if I worked hard enough, maybe I could take her back. I saw her once through the window. She looked happy with you. I didn't want to ruin that. He felt a lump in his throat. You watched her? She nodded weakly. I wanted to be sure she was okay. I would walk by every week just to hear her laugh. I couldn't go inside. I was ashamed. He took her trembling hand gently. You don't have to be ashamed. You did what you thought was right. You wanted her safe. And she is. She's healthy. She's happy. She laughs every day. A tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, Thank you for giving her what I couldn't. He shook his head. No, you gave her life. I only continued what you started. The room went quiet for a moment. The only sound was the soft beeping of the monitor beside her bed. Then she said something that broke his heart completely. When I saw her last, she had a pink ribbon in her hair. Did you tie it? He smiled through the tears that burned his eyes. Yes, she likes pink. She says it makes her feel like a flower. Her lips curved into a tiny smile. That's good. She deserves all the flowers in the world. He couldn't hold back anymore. Why didn't you come back sooner? We could have helped you. You didn't have to face everything alone. She looked at him with tired eyes. Because I didn't want to be a burden. You already had your own child. You gave my baby a home when I couldn't. I just wanted to earn enough to stand on my feet before facing her again. He realized then how much pain she had carried in silence. No one had helped her. No one had stood by her. She had been fighting alone just to see her daughter smile again. She coughed softly and closed her eyes for a moment. He quickly called the nurse who adjusted her oxygen mask. After a while, she opened her eyes again, breathing a little easier. I named her Hope, she whispered, because even when I had nothing left, I still had hope she'd live a better life. He felt tears rolling freely down his face now. Hope is a beautiful name, he said softly, and she truly lives up to it. For the next few hours, he stayed by her side, holding her hand. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she just listened as he told her stories about the baby, how she giggled when hearing music, how she loved to crawl after her brother, how she smiled in her sleep. Each story brought a faint smile to her lips. The night grew deeper. The lights in the hallway dimmed and everything went still. At one point, she looked at him again and said quietly, Can I see her? One last time? His heart clenched. Of course. I'll bring her tomorrow morning. She'll be so happy to see you. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with peace. I'll wait. He stayed with her until the nurse gently asked him to go home and rest. As he stood up, she squeezed his hand one last time. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He didn't realize it would be the last word she'd ever say. When he returned early the next morning, holding the baby in his arms, the nurse met him outside the room. Her expression said everything before she even spoke. I'm sorry, she said softly. She passed away peacefully a few hours ago. He felt the world go quiet. It was as if the air had left the room, leaving only silence. He looked through the glass at the empty bed, the blankets neatly folded, and tears blurred his vision. He went inside slowly and placed a small pink ribbon on the bedside table. The same ribbon the woman had noticed in her daughter's hair. She's safe, he whispered, voice breaking. She'll always be safe. That day he arranged for her burial with the help of the hospital staff. There weren't many people there, no family, no friends, just him and a few nurses who had cared for her in her final days. He didn't know her full story, where she was born, who her parents were, what dreams she once had, but he knew she was brave. She had given everything she had for her child's life, even if it meant fading away quietly. When he went home that evening, He hugged both children tightly. His son asked where he had been, and the baby, too young to understand, smiled and touched his face. He looked at the little girl with tears in his eyes and whispered, "Your mother loved you more than you'll ever know." The next day he planted a small tree in his backyard. He told his son it was for someone special who once saved a life with love. Every morning the children watered it together, laughing as the leaves grew brighter and fuller with time. The man often sat there in the evenings, watching them play under the tree. Sometimes he thought about the woman's last words, "I'll wait." And somehow, he felt she was still watching from somewhere above. Finally at peace, knowing her daughter was surrounded by the warmth she had always wanted for her. He didn't see her as someone who had abandoned her child anymore. To him, she was a mother who had made the hardest choice out of love. A love so deep that even the world's harshness couldn't destroy it. From that day forward, he made a promise. Not just to raise the little girl, but to tell her one day how strong her mother was. He wanted her to know that she was born out of sacrifice, not sadness. And so every night before putting her to bed, he whispered softly to her, "You are loved, little hope, more than you can ever imagine." Years had quietly passed since that night in the hospital. The small tree the man had planted behind his house now stood tall and full of green leaves. Every time the wind blew, it made a soft rustling sound like a gentle whisper reminding him that love never truly disappears. It only changes form. The little girl had grown beautifully. Her laughter filled the house, her voice bright and full of life. She had the same kind eyes as her mother, and when she smiled, it carried that same softness he remembered from the woman he met on the park bench years ago. He had kept his promise. He had raised her with love, care, and dignity, never letting her feel she was different or unwanted. She was a blessing to the family, a light that had turned their grief into warmth. His own son, who was once just a little boy, had grown into a kind young man. The two children had become inseparable like real siblings. They fought, laughed, shared secrets, and stood by each other through everything. Whenever someone asked, the boy would proudly say, "She's my sister," and she would giggle and hug him tight. The man watched them grow and sometimes found himself amazed at how life had changed. What once began as a heartbreaking night of tears had turned into a home full of laughter. Still, sometimes when he looked at the little girl, memories of her mother returned like waves, gentle but unending. He never forgot the promise he made at her mother's bedside. As the years went by, he often wondered when the right time would come to tell her the truth about her mother. He didn't want her to grow up believing a lie, but he also didn't want her heart to break too soon. So he waited until she was ready. The day came unexpectedly. It was the little girl's 7th birthday. The house was filled with the smell of homemade cake, balloons tied to chairs, and laughter echoing from the living room. Neighbors had gathered, and his son was helping her blow out candles. After everyone left, the evening grew calm. The two children played quietly in the yard while he cleaned up the dishes. He looked out the window and saw them sitting near the tree, talking and laughing. The sight warmed his heart. Then he noticed the little girl staring at the small wooden sign near the base of the tree, the one that said, "For someone who loved deeply." She turned and called out, "Dad, who is this tree for?" Her innocent question made him pause for a moment. He knew that day would come, but hearing it still made his heart heavy. He walked outside, sat beside her, and looked up at the tree as the last light of sunset painted the sky orange and gold. "It's for a very special person," he said softly. "Someone you knew?" she asked curiously. He nodded. "Yes, someone I'll never forget." She tilted her head, still waiting for more. He took a deep breath. "There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time," he began gently. "You were too little before to understand, but I think you're ready now." The little girl listened quietly, her small hands resting on her knees. He continued slowly, choosing each word with care. "A long time ago on a rainy night, I met a young woman. She was kind, but she was also very tired and lost. She was holding a baby, you." Her eyes widened slightly. "Me?" He nodded with a warm smile. "Yes, you. She loved you more than anything in this world, but life was very hard for her. She had no home, no one to help her, and no way to feed you. She was scared that she might lose you forever if she couldn't keep you safe. So she made the hardest choice any mother could make. She asked me to take care of you." The little girl's eyes filled with quiet tears, but she didn't speak. She didn't leave because she didn't love you, he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. She left because she loved you too much to let you suffer. She worked hard day and night, hoping one day she could come back for you. But before she could, she got sick. The girl's lips trembled. Is she gone? He nodded gently. Yes, but before she left this world, she told me how much she loved you. She said your name, Hope. She said you were her reason to keep going. The girl wiped her tears and looked at the tree again. So this tree is for her? He smiled softly. Yes, it grows because of her love. Every leaf that moves in the wind reminds me of her strength and your laughter. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. The little girl finally leaned her head on his arm and whispered, "Thank you for being my dad." He swallowed the lump in his throat and hugged her close. "Thank you for letting me be one," he said quietly. From that day, something changed in her. She became even more thoughtful, always kind to everyone she met. She loved helping people who looked lonely or tired. Sometimes when she saw a woman with a baby, she would smile softly as if remembering something deep inside. Years continued to pass, and the tree grew stronger, its roots deep, its branches wide. It became a part of their family's story. Every birthday, every happy memory seemed to begin and end beneath its shade. As the girl grew older, she started asking more questions about her mother, what she looked like, what her voice sounded like, what kind of person she was. The man answered every question with honesty and tenderness. He told her about the courage it took for a young woman to give her child a chance at life, even if it meant walking away. Sometimes, when they sat under the tree, he would point up and say, "If you look closely, you'll see her smile hiding between the leaves." And the girl would laugh, looking up, pretending to see her mother smiling down. One spring morning, many years later, the man found an old box while cleaning the attic. Inside it were a few things the woman had left behind: a baby blanket, a small bracelet, and a photo that must have been taken long before he met her. The picture was faded, but her smile was clear. He decided it was time to give it to Hope. When he handed her the box, she looked inside and held the photo carefully. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She was," he said softly. "And you look just like her." Hope smiled through tears. "Can I put her picture near the tree?" "Of course," he said, his voice filled with pride. That evening, they placed the photo inside a small glass frame and set it beside the roots. The sunset painted everything golden, and for a moment it felt as if the world stood still. The man watched his two grown children, his son and Hope, standing side by side beneath the tree. He realized that love had come full circle. The woman who once thought she had lost everything had, in truth, left behind something eternal, a family built not by blood alone but by compassion and faith. When the wind blew that night, the leaves shimmered under the moonlight. Hope looked up and whispered, "I'll make her proud." And she did. She grew into a kind-hearted woman who worked with children in need. She never forgot what her mother had gone through and wanted to help other mothers who struggled like her. Every time she helped someone, she felt as if her mother was smiling somewhere, proud of the woman her little girl had become. The man often watched her from afar, knowing that the pain of the past had blossomed into something beautiful. He had done his part, but truly it was her mother's love that had carried them all. Years later, when Hope had children of her own, she brought them to the same park where it all began. She showed them the bench under the old streetlight and said softly, "This is where my story started." Her children, curious and innocent, asked, "Is this where Grandpa found you?" She smiled gently. "Yes, this is where kindness met love." As they walked home, the wind brushed softly against her hair. She turned her eyes to the sky, whispering, "Thank you, Mama." At that moment, it felt as if the clouds parted just enough to let the sun shine through, warming her face like a mother's gentle touch. And somewhere beyond what eyes can see, love, quiet, endless love, watched over them all.